Hey there. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Unsecurity Podcast. This is episode 110, and the date is December 15th, 2020. I'm your host today, Brad Nye. Joining me as usual is my good friend and coworker, Evan Francine. Good morning, Evan.
Good morning, Brad.
And as you guys can see if you're watching, joining us this morning is another good friend and coworker, Oscar Minks.
Hey, good morning, Brad.
Morning. So,
Oscar Minks.
as if the fourth quarter wasn't crazy enough already, right? Like we're 2 weeks from the end of the year and everybody's full bore, and all of a sudden SolarWinds breaks and they're hacked. So it's been a little bit, I would say yesterday was chaotic. Would you agree, Oscar?
Yeah, I would say it was chaotic. It's a fair word.
So before we really dig into that, let's catch up and see how everyone is doing. Evan, how's it going?
It's going, man. It's 16 days, 16 hours left of 2020. I'm sort of tired of it, man. It's been a crazy ass year. A lot of good things, though,
Mm-hmm.
Security Studio had a good announcement last week, out of the state of North Dakota. They made our S2ME, for people who don't know, the S2ME is the Personal Information Security Risk Assessment, made it available to all their North Dakota residents.
Oh, cool.
So that was,
I missed that.
So it was
See,
really
this is
good
how you
news.
can tell it's a crazy time of year. I missed that somehow.
Yeah. The news came out on Friday. That's when they made the press release. And then, it's lots and lots of things have happened in our industry since then.
That's very cool. What about you, Oscar? I know you got some sweet fishing time and you showed those great pictures of the rainbow trout you caught the other day.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm ready for 2020 to be over, but I will say that we're moving into my favorite fishing season of the year, which is trout season down here in Kentucky. As it gets a little bit colder, gets primed for catching trout, and so me and my wife got out, did some fly fishing Saturday, and both of us landed a trophy trout. We consider anything over a 20-inch a trophy trout. And so that was a lot of fun. Work is definitely busy, hectic. I can't believe, you guys were saying there's only 16 days left for the year, because I feel like I have way more than 16 days worth of work to still get done. And then people continue to get owned. So that pile just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But yeah, I'm ready to wind this year down and get started on a fresh new one.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, those fish were gorgeous. I was a
Thank
little
you.
bit jealous. I'm not gonna lie.
I get so excited, man, and it's a good feeling to land one of those, especially I use like ultralight gear, and so you got to kind of use some finesse techniques to get those big bulls out of the water.
And we're in between here. It's too cold to go fishing. Everything's frozen over, but it's not frozen enough to go ice fishing. So
yeah, I heard that you guys are a little behind, right, on the lake freeze this year.
Yeah, but it's making up for it. It's like 10 degrees out right now. So
nice.
It's
you guys always make fun of me for not knowing what the cold is in Kentucky, but it was like 15 this morning when I woke up. So
yeah, that's cold.
We're getting some cold weather.
Oh man, yeah. Say, like you said, it's been just hectic and chaotic, and of course, all of our clients, or a lot of the clients that we have that were using SolarWinds, called, so we were scrambling to make meetings happen and kind of calm them down. And I know you guys were working on putting out that nice release and trying to educate people, because I think, well, a good transition. There was a lot of rush to publish the news, and it kind of came across as worse. I know when I first saw it, I was like, oh crap. And it's not, I mean, it's still an oh crap moment, but it's not as big of one as it initially came across as.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the unknown still scares me, right? And we don't know. I think we'll probably get into that, but my initial gut was same as yours. This is this is bad, and it is bad. But my fear was, how many people could be impacted out of that 300,000 client portfolio of SolarWinds, which is huge.
Yeah.
But the good news is I think we started to learn a little more as the day went on, and it made me sleep a little easier. I still didn't sleep good, but
Yeah. So I guess as everyone knows, Evan and I, we planned to do the Security at Home series again, but as I put in the notes, 2020 won't stop 2020, and so we have pivoted today to talk really about the SolarWinds and FireEye, and just try to put some perspective around it, I guess, cut through some of the noise and just talk about it. So yeah, as Oscar mentioned, the initial reports were, the 300,000 customers and this big, huge list, and 425 of the top 500 Fortune 500 companies are, using. But what it turns out is there were 33,000 customers for the Orion product, right? It was just that one specific product that had this happen. And of those 33, they're saying what, 18,000-ish actually downloaded the malicious code. And from what I've seen, it appears that this was specifically targeted at government agencies. I mean, the list that's come out is crazy. Commerce, Treasury, Homeland Security, and that's just off the top of my head. I've been seeing the latest from overnight.
Yeah, I would say on that 18,000, we were chatting about that yesterday a little bit with our team, and everybody's like, oh my God, that's huge. And that is, it's a lot of people. But if we do the statistics on that, it's about 1% of the SolarWinds portfolio. So to me, that's a positive note. 1% versus 50 or 60%, I like that number. It was a lot lower than I initially thought.
Yeah.
I take the other approach, man. I like the fact that, different perspectives are always healthy, but we're talking 18,000 organizations. We're not talking 18,000 people.
Right.
It's not like 18,000 social security numbers are exposed. We're talking 18,000 organizations potentially, and all of their data, the intellectual property, their customers. So, I mean, this could get a lot uglier. I mean, you just think about, the multiplication through the chain. I mean, this isn't going away anytime soon. It's going to be bad.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying 18,000 is
a
good thing. Yeah.
Not trying to downplay that number.
Yeah. I was scared it was going to be the whole 300K, and to learn it was 18K. Well, at least not everyone was owned. And I think that's an important thing too, that we'll probably get into, is helping folks understand, a little bit more about this, because I've seen a lot of misinformation already. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of misinformation about this. And, people don't understand that it's not all of the SolarWinds products. Right. It's one product, and that's Orion. Now, that doesn't mean we may not later learn that some of the other products used by SolarWinds were affected. But today, all we know is that it is Orion, and I don't think we should go assuming that the entire SolarWinds catalog has been compromised until we find evidence that would present that to us.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Well, if you were an attacker, with this sophistication and had this level of access to SolarWinds infrastructure, what do you think would stop you from potentially getting at other products?
Well, I think part of it is, it looks like, so I pulled up the latest list. It's the Treasury, Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, Defense, and Commerce. I mean, that's pretty much the core of the U.S. government, right? Like, you get Homeland Security and State and Defense, and then you get, for like protection and all that stuff, and then Treasury and Commerce for financial. It looks like at this point, because I haven't seen any reports of any other companies reporting or being reported that they've been breached. So it looks like this was focused on the government. And I think that gives those other 18,000 customers a chance to patch without getting owned.
If I could play the devil's advocate for a minute.
No, go for it.
My thoughts around that are, if you're an attacker and you have 18,000 candidates, who are you going to go after first? It's going to be, those prime candidates, those big candidates, right? So before your backdoor, your exploit gets had, you want to focus on those larger entities and establishing, those persistence mechanisms through pivoting, because we know they did that here. Now, my fear is that a lot of the other organizations don't have the level of sophistication needed to detect an attack, because we know there's going to be a whole lot of those that fall into that 18,000. And my other fear is that they use that back door. It would have been pretty trivial, based on what I know, to script some sort of secondary exploit or attack in that kill chain that contacts everyone in the back door and deploys a secondary persistence mechanism, utilizing some of the techniques we know they like to do, is phallus malware living off the land, like a lot of stuff we see, Cobalt Strike, C2 beacons.
Yep.
And so my fear is they could have established further persistence in all 18,000, but it's going to be difficult to detect.
Yeah.
And they're not actually going to act on that until they work through those higher tier candidates, and then eventually they make their way down to those others. And that leads me to the point, I don't want people to think that a patch is a silver bullet here.
No.
Because they had a backdoor that was known open to what's believed to be a Russian APT. So they could have easily deployed other backdoors throughout their network. And on top of that, we know Orion is a network management and system management tool, which means they don't have to do too much recon enumeration, because their backdoor already supplied them with a large majority of the recon they would do in an attack.
Yeah, and we know from what I've seen, they used the teardrop attack to drop Cobalt Strike. So we know, that's what they're doing. So, one of my vCISO customers emailed first thing yesterday. We jumped on a call at 9:30 and went through all the steps. And I had them put in, make sure they had PowerShell logging enabled, going to their SIEM, looking for encoded PowerShell. Gave them some things to look for around, additional, like you said, those command and control on that Orion server. And I have not heard anything from them yet. So that's I'm hoping they got all that done, and that they haven't had that happen. But
yeah,
and here's, we've never seen an attack of this scale.
No.
In my almost 30 years in this industry, I've never seen an attack of this scale, meaning this many organizations involved at the same time, right? So sort of desensitized, it seems like, people that I've talked to sort of desensitized by the numbers. When you talk about 18,000, like if it was 18,000 customers, which is what we're used to, you're like, big deal. That stuff happens every single day. But when we talk about 18,000 organizations and on SolarWinds customer list, and this is part of the 300,000, I don't know how many of these are part of the 18,000, but you've got 425 of the US Fortune 500, all 10 of the top 10 US telecommunications companies, all 5 branches of the US military, all 5 of the top 5 US accounting firms, the Pentagon, the State Department, the National Security Agency, the Department of Justice, the White House. SolarWinds is so embedded in so many different organizations that, and when you think about, all the stuff that's going on, our focus today as an industry is on, government stuff. It's on, FireEye. FireEye was the big thing last week. we're not even focused on these small to mid-sized businesses. I mean, FRSecure is, but I'm talking the industry. And so there could be many things going on right now in small to mid-sized businesses, or education, I think, is going to get hit hard. I think,
Oh, yeah.
post-secondary, because they have crappy controls in place already. They're not going to notice many of the things going on. I mean, it's just, this is the biggest shit show I've ever seen.
Oh,
You
I
know,
don't. Yeah.
even if you play it out as positive as possible, like, well, maybe they'll patch because the patch is due out today, right? Well, maybe they'll patch, and maybe the attackers weren't all that concerned about the other, 17,000. I don't know, man. If I have an indicator that anything in my environment might be compromised, consider it compromised.
Yeah. Well.
Persistence is so easy with this attack too, right? I mean, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's why I put in the show notes. I crossed out the infosec at home and put all hell broke loose. Right. Like, we're trying to. Yeah. It's just unprecedented. It's just crazy.
I think Evan hit a real
Right.
good point too that people should be thinking about. Just because you're not using that particular product doesn't mean you're not going to be affected by this. Knowing the top 10 network providers were affected, and they likely have hooks and ingress points into a large majority of our domestic businesses. It's possible they could pivot through other entities that you're associated with, going back to knowing your vendors and knowing what technologies your vendor use, why that's important here is to know if you're using a vendor, even though you weren't using Orion, if you have a vendor who does utilize Orion, it's possible you could be affected as a secondary.
Well, and how many MSPs are in that 18,000? Right. So now what's the number of secondary companies that aren't directly licensed for Orion that are being monitored by Orion? That 18,000 maybe is closer to 30,000. We don't know. I think this is something that it's going to be a long time before we truly understand the total impact of this. And that's not even going into if there's retaliation and what happens going back.
Yeah, this is it was sort of one of the perfect targets. You know what I mean? You go after SolarWinds, and it's embedded in so many different places, and most people whitelist or
well, the documentation,
approve DLLs and things like that are running from Orion because it's chatty, but it's trusted.
No, SolarWinds has in their documentation to exclude the install directory from virus scans.
I know, right?
You're not going to find it.
And yesterday, I think I saw the virus total, 1 out of 67 AVs were picking up on the DLL. I'm sure that number's increased now, but we're still so signature based that, it floated for a while.
And it's so easy to change that. Maybe not now. They've hopefully gotten them out of SolarWinds, so they can't inject into signed DLLs. But
yeah, I will say the whole exercise that I give kudos to FireEye because it's unfortunate they were owned, but they've been transparent. Without them being owned, this probably would have went on a whole lot longer than it did. They did have the level of sophistication to determine this exploit, and then also they've been pretty transparent. And so a lot of security companies in general don't take that approach of transparency. And so I will give them kudos. I think they're working hard to get this information out. And they did release more information last night, more domains, more hashes, things like that. But there's something too that, we all have to be aware of is that, like you were saying, Brad, those indicators aren't going to last very long. Knowing this is likely a nation state, as soon as those indicators go live, consider them burned. They're going to pivot to new infrastructure instantly and keep, moving so we can't detect them.
Yeah, they've planned for that. I mean, you don't do something at this level without having that as part of it, right? Like additional things. What was I? Oh, I was gonna say something and I forgot. Darn it.
Well, and it was funny too, because yesterday, or was it yesterday, that CISA released their emergency directive, and they were instructing all agencies to turn off, right, FireEye, or even
Mhm.
install it. But wait a second, that's your stuff to monitor stuff.
I know.
Not only have you, yeah, you may have, potentially thwarted that one particular attack vector, but now all the other attack vectors go undetected,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah. I've
It's like,
seen
oh,
some
shoot.
other recommendations around that, and it's, shut down from your NMS, your network monitoring system, or on, shut down the internet access, right? The back door is coming from the internet. You still need to monitor the health. So an alternative approach is don't allow any egress from there. Let it talk to your internal nodes, because they can't still pivot to the back door if you shut down ingress and egress to the internet there. And so, like Evan's saying, you can still know the health and uptime, but it is a risk, in some mechanism. But yeah, it's scary stuff, especially when you have critical assets. You need to know if they are up or down. Now you're flying blind. You learned your NMS has been backdoored. It was a bad day for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the bad days will continue for a while, I think. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I
Well,
mean, if I were running SolarWinds in my environment and I was an Orion user, I'd be going on a serious threat hunting exercise throughout my entire environment right now.
1000%. Yep.
yep. Yeah.
And don't just waste that time. Don't just waste that time if you're doing a threat hunting exercise. So that's my advice. And if you're doing a threat hunting exercise, don't waste it by like, well, we didn't find any threats. No, as you're going along, start closing things.
Mhm.
Right? Most organizations do a terrible job of egress. They do a terrible job of default. Instead of the default deny, they go with a default approve. Use this opportunity as you're going through your threat hunting exercise to document your environment, to really close things down, get closer to a default deny stance, because that's the best stance, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. I think that's what I've been telling everyone that I've talked to is, right, get your PowerShell logging turned on, start watching it, start exactly like you're saying, reviewing in depth what's going on in your environment, and yeah, shut down anything that or fix anything you find.
Right. The best advice I ever got, I was a junior sort of security analyst at the time, and one of the grumpy old pros, other than telling me RIF, RFM all the time, RTFM. Do you guys get that advice a lot
Not
when
anymore,
you're
but yes.
younger?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
remember those guys though, right?
Remember
You'd ask a question, he'd like, RTFM.
The grumpy
Seriously,
Unix
you
admin
have it
stereotype.
right. But one of the things he told me, and it still sticks with me today, is the people who are the best at security are people who intimately understand themselves. So understanding all of your assets, understanding all your network traffic, understanding all these things. Now, complexity got way out of hand, so most organizations have no clue about a lot of stuff because it seems overwhelming. But at some point, you're going to have to get your hand around what is approved and what is not approved, what data flows are. I mean, you just have to get detailed. You have to understand yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. But yet you're right too, Oscar. I mean, FireEye comes out looking like a champ on all of this. Last week they were sort of the chump. They're the champ, right? Because they did do a great job of finding this.
And they released what 300 something countermeasures for their own tools. Like realistic.
Yeah, they released all the SIGs. They continue to release updates as they learn right now. And it was funny. I had a call from a personal friend on Saturday, and he's like, "Hey, I've got some extra cash. I'm thinking about investing right now. Give me a stock to buy." I was like, "Mandiant FireEye." He's like, "Why?" I said, "They got breached. Stocks plummeted this week. I bet anything they recover and come through this looking really good on the other side because they're going to do something good, help people." And he's like, "All right." And then yesterday, I'm like, "Told you, bud."
Yeah. No, I mean, they are handling this, I think, about as well as I've ever seen a company that like at that level of compromise, right? I mean,
Yep.
they lost all their red teaming tools.
Mhm.
They're out in the
And you
wild.
have to, like in that situation, you have to, right? They're doing the right thing. They don't have any other choice. So if this is a chance for them to prove they are the company that they say they are,
Yeah.
right? And so anything else would have been unacceptable, and that stock would have continued to plummet, and that business would have been in dire straits. But I'm happy to see they are doing the right thing. And the biggest thing to me, like, is if they didn't get breached, how long would have this have gone on before it was detected? Because it took, a leading security company to identify this. And we know too, so this is important for people to understand, the timeline that we've been given so far was that this backdoor was first implemented in March of this year. Although we did look, the first update affected was 2019.4, which actually came out in November of 2019. So we know, we can confirm at least 9 months, potentially 11 months right now, that this backdoor has been in the wild and no one has detected it. And FireEye, it took FireEye getting breached to detect it. If FireEye was never breached, this could have gone on for another 12 months, maybe even longer. And
Right.
so we're lucky on a few things there that FireEye did get breached, but then we're lucky too. I look at this as a APT mistake. They should have held off on FireEye and focused on softer targets, and they would have been undetected. But yeah, to me, it's scary too, right? To know. And this is a supply chain attack that is sophisticated. We hear that a lot, like, oh, sophisticated attack, blah, blah, blah. No, most of the time they're not. This is, right? We would all agree this is a sophisticated attack. Yeah. And what scares me too is the implications of, now we have to start looking at those supply chains a little bit more, like we should have already been doing. And so SolarWinds is owned. How many other vendors are affected in supply chains that we're not putting under scrutiny because of those things like this? Just going back to what you said, Brad, SolarWinds recommends you whitelist or approve list their application installation directory. How many other vendors are you doing that for? How many other tools are you doing that for? And how confident are you in their security and them being part of your supply chain and knowing that they're not affected? So it's going to flip things a little bit for a lot of researchers. And, this is things that we've known and feared, but this puts those things into the present a lot more. And so I think as a researcher, and, as a threat hunter, forensic expert, when we look at those signed, and we've seen this before, right, in older attacks, but when we look at those signed applications, you can't always trust those. Trust your gut when you're researching and you're investigating. And if that signed application is doing something that it should not be doing, then it needs to go under scrutiny and you need to investigate that. The challenge for me is I'm not going to be able to get source code for SolarWinds. Somehow FireEye did. And that's a big question. How did they get the source code? I don't know. But it's at least worth recognizing those and then opening that channel of communication with those vendors to say, this application is not behaving as expected. I need you to tell me why.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned they had the source code. I mean, literally, there was that article, they went through 50,000 lines of source code for SolarWinds Orion and found the backdoor. Like, as they were investigating their own. Like, the odds of that happening are so minuscule. Like, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, the biggest thing, like we've talked about, before we hopped on here is, and I just said it, but like, how'd they get the source code? Yeah. Maybe it is available. I don't know.
Code escrow or something.
Yeah, and it is, again, kudos to them for being in that, investigation, looking at a signed, approved application, noticing anomalies in that behavior, and then saying, we got to break this code apart and see what's going on.
I saw another article that was saying that the attackers were active in the government as of Sunday too. Like, this wasn't something that they were just sitting back and had the backdoors there. They were actively in agencies. Like, it'll be interesting to see as this comes out, like, how much data was exfilled, or were they just monitoring? Like, what is the impact of this going to be?
I doubt we'll ever know, unfortunately. Yeah. And going back to what Evan said, most places suck at egress. And so what are the chances well, knowing, number one, this could go back almost a year today. So what are the chances that you've got immediate egress logs to identify what could have been exfilled? They're not great. and then change that to a year.
Right.
There, it's, but, I would say we would rely on the backbone, and hopefully that backbone providing this could, help the government entities and help those, sensitive organizations. But now, knowing that a lot of our backbone was likely compromised, and certainly, we could almost say certainly at this point compromised, then is that going to be, retrievable? Can we ever validate this? I don't know. I don't feel good about it.
Well, knowing Russians, like I know Russians, Russians have always been known for playing really good chess, right? And so you think multiple steps ahead. And, we said, thank God FireEye, maybe they chose the wrong target. Maybe they chose the right target. Maybe that was the point, was for you to detect and spend all your time, because they do diversion attacks all the time too. For you to spend all your time on SolarWinds while other things are occurring too, right? Because it wasn't an accident. They chose to exfil things from FireEye and become known.
Yep.
Yeah.
That part scares me too.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Evan. And I don't know how, if we want to get into our personal paranoia podcast here, if we want to stay on InfoSec.
No, but it's true. It's very conceivable, right?
No, that's exactly. I've thought about this a lot too, about the time they showed their hand on top of that, right? It was a week before certification of our election. Also, knowing that they were at such a sophisticated level, they could own a major vendor and the supply chains of 300,000 people, exploit that code and get that code distributed. That makes me question if they needed those tools they even exfilled from Mandiant, right? So is this a show, like Evan said, is this a move for a bigger play that we're unaware of? And my gut too, I don't want to go too far off topic, is we know they want to cause social chaos and social disruption. That's always a primary motive of Russian APTs. We have to accept that. And this was a prime time and a very, very challenging year for Americans to pull off attack of this sophistication level that has implications that could cause significant disruption in our society. Business entities and personal as well. And I don't want to go into that too much, but there's going to be a lot of runoff from this that we're going to see over the next 2 weeks that I believe will further, expand that combustion chamber they already lit 4 or 5 years ago and continue to cause social chaos, antitrust, and division. I don't want that, but I fear that's what's happening.
I mean, they've got, like we said, they're in the top 10 telecom. Imagine they take down, one of those and knock a quarter of the U.S. offline, business and personal. I mean, I don't know how many people those top 10 serve, but I would guess it's probably in that 80+% easily.
Oh yeah.
And
and I would like to see too who those top 10 are, because if you guys know, I think there's 3 companies, right, that own something like 70% of the world's backbone.
Right.
If those 3 are in that top 10, then I don't even care about the other 7. I know that they have hooks available everywhere.
Yeah. If they can get into
and you brought up a good point too, Brad. And I don't think this is tinfoil hat stuff. This is very, very conceivable things. Tinfoil hat stuff is stuff where it's like, I make a big leap from this to that, right? There are lines that you can draw from where we are today, where this could go, how we got here. If you've got the perspective of seeing kind of these pieces being played on a big chessboard, right? They made their move, expect us to make our moves, right? And then they're not going to make, there's this anticipation. Now we do the same thing. I'm not saying that our 3-letter agencies, the NSA, doesn't have their things that they're doing as well, but what's the next move, right? You mentioned, so we've got all this crap that I have to deal with here in my own backyard. But I'm also thinking, what happens when the U.S. decides to do what they decide to do with their allies, meaning, Great Britain, Canada, Israel. This, because truly what took place, this particular thing is evidence of war. This is a cyber war. That is warfare, right? You don't attack 18,000 entities, including our own government, and not call it war. Call it what it is.
Yeah. I did do some research thinking about this too last night. And so I was looking at other attacks that have happened in supply chains and by nation states, right? And it's going back to what Evan's saying here. Like, there have been other supply chain attacks, right? That's targeted, but we've seen, like, before, like Russia, we know, targeted Eastern Europe and Ukraine when Ukraine was, war riddled, right? And we've seen, like, China execute attacks in Asia and even specific outlets within China itself. But we haven't seen an APT do this large of a targeted supply chain attack on another nation state. And so that's scary to me, because I think it's going to force our government into a response of some sort. And I think the more that our people understand and learn about this, the more we're going to understand we deserve a response. We deserve, support from our government, and there deserves to be a response to the whoever. If we confirm this was Russia, right, there deserves to be a response. And I haven't seen that this has been confirmed yet. It is speculation still at this point, but if this is confirmed, I believe it will be confirmed, it warrants a response. And it scares me. I mean, it really does scare me for what that means for our nation, for the state of the world, and where we go from here.
Oh, this is a huge escalation in, the cyber war kind of field, I guess. I don't know what the right term is for that, but this was a massive escalation. And like you said, Evan, they didn't have to exfil those tools. Like, there was a reason it happened at that point, and they made it known that this happened. You don't get in and do this without and make a mistake like that and get caught.
No, these guys are too good to be making mistakes, right? You don't get to where you're at doing what you're doing by making mistakes. There's purpose behind just about everything they do. This isn't like the old school, attackers either, where we were doing things for fun, right? We did make mistakes. We were noisy. This is like nation state shit isn't noisy. There aren't mistakes. It's a chess game. And what our move is next is going to dictate, multiple moves down the road. It's messy. And if you ask anybody on the street about this, they have no clue that any stuff is going on.
Or they've heard of it, but don't comprehend the scope of it. Right?
That scares me too. That no one knows, or they've heard of it, they don't comprehend. And it scares me because we know that a lot of the folks are going to learn about this likely through individuals that shouldn't be telling people about it, meaning folks that don't really understand themselves. And so we're going to get a lot of parroting in media. We're going to get a lot of misinformation in media. And I think that's a risk too. I want people to understand what this is, what the implications are.
This would be.
And I understand. I understand there's certain people that are passive. That, why would the U.S. respond? Why do we need to respond? Because if you don't, it just continues, and it continues to get worse and worse and worse. There has to be retaliation of some sort. Plus, that's the thing. This is it's almost like really, 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 really big schoolboys bullying each other on the playground, on the internet playground, and we're all sort of collateral damage,
Yeah.
When does something of this magnitude become an act of war? This is cyber war. We could say that, but when does it become an act of war? Like, if you confirm it's a nation state sponsored by military that actively targeted United States entities, businesses, and people, when does that become an act of war? What magnitude? Because I don't think we're going to see one any bigger than this.
Well, and my concern is, right, if we escalate with a cyber attack back, what's their next step, right? Like, what is the correct response?
Mm-hmm.
Because
I don't know.
you know, if we go and knock something offline for them, well, we know they've already got hooks into so many things.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, and it's okay to have hooks. It's like the nuclear standoff. You have to get to a point where you both believe you will mutually destroy each other.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, if you do this one thing, if you push one step further, this is where you know what I mean? And then do you want to just end everything now?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we're not going to hear some sort of a leak about the other way, kind of like, hey, yeah, that's great, but here's what we've got.
Yeah.
And then that kind of, you know, I'm expecting something more like, you know, economic sanctions or something like that to hurt them, so it doesn't necessarily escalate and really become disruptive. Because I don't think either country really truly wants to be knocked offline.
Mm-hmm. I don't know enough about this, you know, the economic state between the United States and Russia. But would an economic sanction have any implication to them? I don't know. Do we have any reliance on each other? I'm not a worldwide.
Yeah, well, I think you would
expert.
have to get like buy-in and from all the allies too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know what the next steps are, but I think that 2020, man, right?
This is it's
Going out with a bang.
there's just so much, and I think it's going to be weeks before we have a good picture and a good understanding, and probably years before we truly realize the full scope of this.
I've seen it was either a tweet or a reply on Reddit or something. Someone was replying to this when it broke, and they said, and this is not verbatim, but it's, you know, this rot is going to go so deep and it's going to take years to find. And I like that word being used for this rot. And that's really what it is. You know, it's an erosion of our security, erosion of our networks, and erosion of our, you know, trusted entities and partners. I don't know that we'll ever fully know how far this goes.
Yeah.
No, not when you have this level of access into something that's so complex that people can't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Most people can't understand their infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, how many IRs do we work that they're like, no idea of what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, most people don't have you know, like Evan had already mentioned, a good handle on their ingress or egress on their network. Don't have good system inventories, don't have good data inventories, or not network diagrams. Do that stuff, people. Please do that.
Well, now would be the time. So two of the things I was thinking about is what listeners need to do. You know, and I think what listeners need to do is we've said it so many times, master the basics of information security. Build in default deny in everything you do. Don't just trust things, whitelist things for the sake of whitelisting things. I mean, actually understand your shit. Excuse my language. Understand your stuff. And set yourself up as like an independent island, right? Like, this is just my little thing, and I'm not letting anybody into it unless I trust you and I've vetted you. You know, treat your golden gems or not golden gems, that'd be weird, but treat your gold like it's gold.
The crown jewels.
Crown jewels, there you go. Treat those like they really are crown jewels.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent opportunity for security people to pitch and maybe even get buy-in and be able to pivot to deny by default, right? Whitelist only.
And what I don't want people to do is to go out and buy another damn blinky light.
No.
Because all you're doing is adding more complexity and more things into your environment that you don't understand. The stuff that we're talking about, the basics, the fundamentals, they're free in most cases. And then build on top of that foundation, right? So then the rot doesn't get into your foundation, right? You have something to stand on. And I think what we need to do as an industry is we need to hold people accountable. I mean, what's going to happen to SolarWinds for this? You should have been, I know it was a super sophisticated attack, but your source code control should never allow this type of behavior ever.
Yeah. How did you allow your DLLs to be modified without realizing it?
That blows my mind. That's one of the biggest keys to this.
Right? I mean, those are your crown jewels. That is the whole purpose for SolarWinds even existing, is their software. And if you can't protect your software, your crown jewels, and I don't care how sophisticated of an attack it was, that, I mean, unless it was like they used
Insider
pixie
attack.
dust and yeah, they used pixie dust and unicorn horns. And that's how they get. Okay, I'll cut you some slack, but they didn't do that, right? There was an electronic intrusion, and you should have been monitoring those things, right? You should have, everything should have been hashed, so nothing gets pushed into production. Everything is tracked. I mean, it's just crazy that you have this many fingers into this many organizations, and your source code control allows somebody to change a DLL that you inject into everybody else.
Mhm.
So something needs to, and I don't know how long we're going to continue to do this as an industry before we actually hold somebody accountable. Because if you don't hold them accountable, expect more of the same crap.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And I know there's probably a lot of great people that work at SolarWinds, but you got to pay for this. This was your mistake.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I think that's the biggest thing, is this was a complete failure on SolarWinds.
Mm-hmm. The only thing that I could see there would be, what if there was a massive internal espionage campaign where they had insiders who were running that code base who actually injected the code? That's the only way I could ever like logically explain how a company like SolarWinds would be able to let those things slip past their processes and into production. But we don't know how that happened yet, but I'm with you guys. I mean, at this point, it seems like an external attack. And if that's the case, I mean, that's like source code 101, right? You monitor for changes to your source code. Any changes that are made are reviewed, approved, tested. So how did that slip in there?
And the sad thing is we've always, for so long, we've just accepted this behavior in our industry, or we slap you with a $50 million fine. Big whoop. I'm a $6 billion company. I don't care. You have to hold people accountable. Otherwise they won't change.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
If SolarWinds, let's say we hold SolarWinds so accountable that we actually put them out of business. You don't think all the other software development companies are going to take notice and be like, oh crap, we better, okay, let's get our ducks in a row.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I saw was like that Orion accounted for like 70% of their revenue through the first 3 quarters of the year. Well, you know what?
So it's
every single person.
So that means
Orion,
it's truly your crown jewels, right?
Yeah. And so every company using Orion, I would guarantee you that contract would allow you an out. That hurt them that way. Like, can you imagine me just losing, even if half those people drop 35% of your revenue overnight? How, and it's not like you're going to gain it back because you've just been completely owned.
Right.
And going to your point,
I was involved in. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, going back to Oscar's point on Insider, either either they've got a failure there that one person would have that ability, or they had how many people compromised. I mean,
it's still ultimately their responsibility, right? I agree with that. It's ultimately that. And even like when I say internal espionage, like I'm not saying that's a thing. I'm just saying when I think logically through how this attack could have happened, like, maybe that's at play.
No, I
but
agree. I'm just saying, like, there's some issues with that even, right? Like,
oh, for sure.
Either they've got one person that was able to do this. Well, that's a huge failure. Or they had multiple people that were compromised. And that's a problem too.
Right. We just need to start. We need to have accountability, man. Otherwise it's the same old. SolarWinds will continue down their same path. Their stock rebounded, from its low. It's still not even at its 52-week low right now. So, it's, we'll we will, God, we just need to hold people accountable. Otherwise nothing changes. Expect
Mhm.
more of this, expect every other software. And how, I'm going to get off on a tangent. I don't want to, but that's what ticks me off. You know what I mean? If you don't, it's like a bunch of kids. You know, if I don't hold my kids accountable for their behaviors, and yeah, I have to punish them. And yeah, I don't like punishing my kids, right? I don't get a kick out of spanking my kids. But if they misbehave or they do, you know, if you don't hold them accountable for their behavior, they continue. Same thing with our companies, you know, in our industry. If we don't hold them accountable, if we don't spank them, why would I change?
Well, and
Money hand over fist.
the problem is, you know, like I said, hey, yeah, the easy way for companies to hold them accountable is to cancel contracts, right? Like, there's no way that you don't have an out at this point. The problem is, how much of a nightmare is it to replace your network monitoring system? I mean, that is a huge undertaking.
Mhm.
So it's not like something you can just like snap your fingers and be done with. This is going to be, in terms of work. I
Make
mean,
them pay for make them pay for threat hunting exercises for all 18,000
yeah,
entities that might be involved.
yeah.
Let me ask you guys something. I don't know the answer to this. I really would like to hear your thoughts on it. So, depending upon the outcome, I expect that knowing our government is involved and all these high profile entities are involved, that SolarWinds is going to be forced to do a proper investigation to determine how this happened. Right. And I also believe that report should be publicly released eventually. Do we believe that that exercise, I'm sorry, could lead to possible sanctions that could be implemented onto large scale providers in that space or just in our space in general? Or do we think this is something that the government may use to later enforce specific sanctions regarding security onto those companies and providers?
I mean, I think that there's this would be the start of it, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
To have that accountability. I wouldn't be surprised to see some new laws put into place specifically addressing this kind of a scenario
Mm-hmm.
around
But not
security.
crappy laws. You know what I mean? We just have so many
That was going
crappy
to be
laws.
my
Yeah,
next question is, do you think our government will actually employ the people who would have the ability to help develop those sanctions and create realistic and valuable sanctions around this? Or do you think it'll be a miss? We've seen misses before, right?
yeah. I think that's the important part is
Mm-hmm.
bringing in true industry experts to consult on this and help them understand, because we know, I mean, excuse me, the normal people, as we call them, is they don't get this, and we know, and this is not a shot at anybody in Congress, but the majority of them are those air quote normal people. They don't truly understand technology and security and the implications around it. So yeah, you have to hope that they're going to bring in the right people to help with this.
Right. Well, and here's just a, you know, a gut check, right? In my 30 years, I was saying that this is the most significant cyber attack I've ever witnessed, you know, and I don't have insider track information like, you know,
Right.
but so it's that big of a deal, right? And do you guys agree? I mean, is this the biggest thing that you guys have seen in your,
I mean,
uh,
well, it certainly appears that way. You know, we don't even know the full scope, and it's easily in terms of, uh,
well, on the surface, right? On the
yeah,
surface, you have a confirmed breach of FireEye. At the same time, you've got a confirmed breach at the U.S. Treasury Department. At the same time, you've got a confirmed breach at the Commerce Department. At the same time, you've got a confirmed breach of source code at an organization that has 18,000 infected installs across, you know, our industries. I mean, can you think of can you think of any breach that's been this impactful?
I mean,
The only thing that I would say would be comparable, but it's not, I mean, would be the Petya, not Petya stuff, right? But the implications weren't quite as severe here. The main difference, and this is something probably we need to make sure everybody understands, is that was based upon exploitation of a vulnerability. This isn't a vulnerability.
Yeah.
This is an implant. This is a backdoor that was forced into those 18,000 folks' networks without them. They didn't have any control over that. There's nothing they could have done. So yeah, I agree. I think this is certainly the biggest attack on the surface that we've seen right now. And we're only, like we said, just discovering the rot. It's going to go deep and it's going to get bigger and bigger. So yeah, I completely agree.
I was thinking of it from, I think you're right. But from a like immediate impact, it's not like, you would see like the Heartbleed or some of those, bigger attacks that would actually cause some issues. We don't even know at this point because nobody was, denied.
Well, that's how you know that's not right. And that's not how you play chess.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a game that plays out over time. And I'm not a guy who raises the red flags much, right? I'm not a panic guy. But if I were to raise this would be something I would be raising a red flag. This is bad. The worst I've seen. And the reason why I say that is if it's that bad, you go to Google News and what are the headlines? Number one headline, Russia. And the reason why I'm drawing the line now between us and normal people, the people that aren't in our industry, the people that we're charged with protecting. Number one headline, Russia's President Putin congratulates Joe Biden on U.S. election victory. So if I read that as a normal person, I'm like, us in Russia, yeah, we're cool. You and I are talking about act of war. So,
yeah.
So if you want to make change, if you want to affect change, get laws passed, that crap has to change.
Yeah.
Because people, it's going to be the population that's going to force it. Us security people, we can bitch and complain as much as we want. We still don't even have a national data breach law. We still don't have a national data privacy law. We still, you know what I mean? It's just like, we just take this as, well, whatever. It's just crap, man. It's very frustrating because we have so much ignorance in our population, in our society, that we don't even know that this stuff is going on.
Yeah, I think, just looking at just what's out there, I think it's going to be, like I said, years before we truly understand the scope. And I don't know if we'll ever fully know.
But then it's going to be, my problem is it's going to be too late.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fact that, that it's that we don't know is, man, take this chance to pivot to deny by default, do some stuff correctly, do the basics, yeah.
I'm not a tinfoil hat guy, but the number one headline is Putin congratulating Biden, right? Their president congratulating our president. Nothing about, assuming it's Russia, which I have no reason to believe it's not, just compromised, your own government, the same government that Joe Biden represents. And I'm not Trump or Biden. It doesn't matter. This is an act of war. And most people sitting in their living rooms today, no clue.
Yeah.
Oh, let's buy some more IoT devices. Let's plug some more shit into our homes. It's just like, we got to slow down and we got to get our hands around this stuff before it gets worse, because it is getting worse, man.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm panicky.
I think we could probably go on with this for hours, but in the interest of all of our listeners, we'll wrap that up for today.
You'll save them from me.
Yeah. Oscar, we'll have to have you on in like a month after we know a little bit more.
Sure. I'd be glad to come back. Can we rehash for our listeners? I think it's critically important what they do right now.
Yeah.
And like Evan mentioned early on, it's funny. I'd made a few notes, 3 little notes about what people need to know. Number one, don't think the patch is a silver bullet. Okay. It's not going to fix if you've already been owned. It may fix that particular backdoor, but very possible they put another backdoor in your network, which leads me to the next point, which Evan said before, threat hunt. If you have this software, threat hunt. Look for anomalies, look for things that are suspicious, look for things you don't suspect, and use this as an opportunity to do some cleansing on your own infrastructure. right? Number 3, understand this is an implant, like I mentioned, and not a vulnerability. It doesn't have to be exploited. Your software has already been exploited. Understand that's a key difference here. So that's why that patch is not a silver bullet. And also all the IOCs, we're sharing IOCs, FireEye sharing IOCs, all that stuff. Expect those are good for a very short amount of time. Don't expect you just look for those IOCs and that's it. Look for anomalies in your network. Look for things that aren't normal. If you see those things, you need help. We're here to help.
Yeah. And turn on PowerShell logging.
Mm-hmm.
It's not on by default. I wish Microsoft would fix that. That's one of the, that is mind blowing on itself, because we're seeing so much fileless malware that exploits PowerShell and nobody has logging on. They don't.
Yeah. And it's the level too. I think there's a level by default that's on now, but it's not very good. Make sure that the level you're on includes script block logging, and it may vary depending upon the OS flavor that you're on right now, or the OS build, but script block logging specifically is one of our most crucial artifacts in identifying the execution of command and control framework. And we know they use command and control frameworks. So
monitor your DNS requests. That's another good one, right? Look at those domains. Do you see, unusual requests going out to unusual domains?
That's so noisy and so hard, but we know too that C2 beacons are run through DNS sometimes too. So we're trying to track down compromised systems. That's a treasure trove if you have that DNS logging enabled too.
Yeah. All right. Well, surprisingly, it's going to blow your minds. There was other news last week. It wasn't just SolarWinds and FireEye.
What?
I know. So we really don't have a lot of time here to go through them. I just wanted to mention them. There was an IoT security bill signed into law. So it requires the creation of some standards. So that's a positive, I think, because that's an area that has been badly neglected. And the two of the next three are directly related to that, in my opinion. So that was a dark reading. CISA released a alert for ICS medical advisory for GE healthcare imaging and ultrasound products, where they could be compromised and patient data could be exposed. So be aware if you're using that. And then there was a zero-click Warmable RCE vulnerability reported in Microsoft Teams. Now, this is why, typically we would recommend probably not allowing communication with the outside with your internal communication tools, if possible, because it requires a specially crafted message to be sent to the person, and then when they click it, it exploits this.
They don't even have to click it. They just have to look at it. And that one's super interesting, Brad. The researcher who found that actually disclosed 5 zero clicks within the Teams platform. Microsoft quietly fixed one of those 5, but has failed to respond if the other 4 has been fixed. And why that's concerning is if you get a business email compromise in your own organization, that attacker can then message your folks, all of your folks, and exploit their systems as well. So if you see messages that look erroneous coming from people that you would not expect, that should be investigated, would be my word of advice for everyone.
Yeah, that's scary. And yeah, like you said, Microsoft's note was we don't release like the vulnerability if it's automatically updated. Right.
Yeah, they're not going to give the details of that. And
right.
I think though you can see the proof of concepts. There's a GitHub. I think I did share that link in the under the hood stuff last week. Folks should check it out. It's scary.
And then the last one. So that was from the Hacker News. The last one is from SC Magazine. Amnesia 33 vulnerabilities affect 158 vendors, millions of devices. So this is a vulnerability in the open source TCP/IP stack, and they're saying that there's a good chance that these vendors and manufacturers don't even know. And do they have any way of pushing updates to address this vulnerability? Are you going to have millions of devices that the user has to go out and manually update, you know,
You mean they're never going to
firmware.
be? You mean they're never going to be remediated then?
Right. So this is going to be. I'm a little bit concerned about that.
Who's the? I'm sorry, the vendor. I missed the vendor, Brad.
No, it's there's 158 different vendors that they've are affected. Researchers at FRSecure are the ones who identified this, and so they reported it to CISA, but FRSecure it was able to identify 158 different manufacturers using the vulnerable stack through internet scans, and estimates the total amount of vulnerable devices in the millions.
That's interesting. I'm gonna have to
read
about that a little more.
They were doing an audit of the open source TCP/IP, 7 stacks, finding vulnerabilities in 4 for UIP, NewNet, FNet, and Pico TCP.
What is is there an exploit for this? You know, I'm curious, like what can you do with the exploit?
I didn't see anything about an exploit, but now that it's been identified, it's only gonna be a matter of time.
Sure.
So yeah, it's like the MediaTek MT76881 Wi-Fi module and vulnerable. So I mean, this is where you go on to like show them and look for what's on the internet with that. Now you've got the list of.
Yeah, I'm too wondering, like, so it's Wi-Fi modules, right? Like going back to what we saw with that iPhone 0-click. You guys seen that last week? I know we talked about it on Under the Hood, but you know, it could be used possibly as like data harvesting techniques for IoT devices as well as even cell phones, you know.
Well, and think about what those IoT devices collect and personal information and all right. And what's crazy is any one of those could have been an entire episode, and they're like an afterthought given how where we're at.
Yep.
All right.
2020, man.
I know. So that's it for episode 110. Thank you, Evan and Oscar. Shout outs for anyone?
Shout out to the state of North Dakota, you know, and their CISO, Kevin Ford. He did he won behind, you know, getting the assessment out to their citizens. So shout out. And then Ryan Cloutier, who worked with, you know, Kevin Ford.
I'm gonna give a shout out to Team Ambush. I think I always do when I'm on here, but I love those dudes. But they're busting butt, you know, Q4, like you guys said. It's been a really busy Q4, and we just keep getting busier right now too. So just shout out to my team for working their butts off and kicking so much butt while you work your butt off. How many times can I say butt in a sentence?
There you go. I mean, it seems I don't want to say it's not cheesy. It's legitimate. Like, truly appreciate the teams. We're not just this isn't just lip service. And I would agree. The consulting side, I'll call it the back office, the supporting staff, the CS, like everybody has just been so busy, and what we've been able to continue doing and continue growing during a pandemic just speaks so much towards, you know, the quality of people we have. Lucky to work with these people.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with 100% of that, Brad. Shout out to you dudes for having me on. This has been fun.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do a follow-up once we know a little bit more. It'll probably be an ongoing service or series.
Yeah, and I'd like to plug Under the Hood too, if that's cool. I started up a new web series. We're doing once a month now, and it's going to be diving in on cyber threat intel, actionable items, breaking apart exploits, so folks can kind of go under the hood of these exploits a little bit more, understand them, and really understand how you can directly respond to those things, what you should be doing. So if you folks are interested, send an email to me or hit up FRSecure, and we'll get you on the list. And we usually give away something free. Well, actually, we're always giving away free stuff. But we'll make sure you know about that sweet free stuff.
There you go. Nice. Yeah, it was that was good. I'm glad you brought that up. All right. Well, thank you to all our listeners. Send us things by email at unsecurity@protonmail.com. If you're the social type, socialize with us on Twitter. I'm at Brad Nye. Evan is at Evan Francine. As Oscar mentioned, he's now doing his web series Under the Hood. So you can reach out to him or reach out through our website and get signed up for that. And lastly, follow Security Studio at Studio Security and FRSecure at FRSecure for more information. And that's it. We'll talk to everyone next week.